Tonight, we're plunging deep into the haunted heart of Texas, where the streets stretch wide, but the shadows stretch wider. This isn't the Texas they show you in postcards. This is something older, darker, and it's still very much alive. We've uncovered 20 strange and scary encounters in Texas cities, true tales whispered by locals, buried in forgotten police files and etched into the bones of buildings that still stand. From ghostly figures in Capitol domes to phantom footsteps in suburban bedrooms, every city on this list hides something terrifying. And tonight, we're bringing it all into the light. But before we begin, here's a warning. Most viewers make one chilling mistake: they leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss the stories that creep in quietly, until it's too late to turn away. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because once you step into this kind of darkness, you'll want a voice guiding you back. Now, tell me, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Because here at Creepy Vibes, the night is only getting started, and the horror, it's waiting in 20 different places. Let's begin. Most cities have a sound to them, a pulse. Austin, though it has an echo, it bounces off limestone walls, slips under bat bridges, and gets caught in the teeth of rusted fences behind old concert halls and record stores. But if you stand in the shadow of the Texas state capitol at night, after the crowds are gone, after the party kids have spilled out of 6th Street like drunk ghosts, you'll hear something else. A knock. One knock. Always at 3:07 a.m. Always from inside the rotunda. Boom. And always followed by death. No one talks about it during the day. They'll mention the dome's height, how it's taller than the U.S. Capitol, how it was made with pink granite from Marble Falls, how the Goddess of Liberty was replaced with a replica in the 80s, but they won't talk about the knocking. Not the locals, not the tour guides, not even the old cops who've seen more than they should have. Because the knock is a promise. It's a signal. It means someone downtown is going to die before the sun comes up. And they always do. Detective Alton Greber wasn't a believer. He was the kind of man who still used a flip phone and tucked in his shirts even on weekends. 47 years old, no wife, no hobbies. Just a job and a beat-up recliner in a one-bedroom off South Lamar. He liked puzzles. Cold cases mostly. The ones no one else had time for. In 2018, he caught what the department called the tourist string. 6 people dead in 9 nights, all visitors to Austin, all found within a 1-mile radius of the Capitol. No signs of trauma. No blood, no broken bones, nothing. Just lifeless bodies lying as if asleep. One of them, a woman named Claire, was found sitting upright on a bench at Woolridge Square, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes wide open, mouth slightly parted, like she'd just seen something that didn't belong in this world. Alton couldn't make sense of it. The autopsies were useless. Some doctors blamed heart failure. Others called it extreme autonomic shock. One coroner, a tired man with dark-rimmed glasses and coffee breath, whispered something Alton never forgot. It's like their brains just gave up. One night, stuck in the office with a stale ham sandwich and 3 empty file folders, Alton heard it. The knock. It came from behind him, somewhere near the rotunda wall, deep within the guts of the building. He stood up, spilled his coffee, walked toward the sound. There was nothing there. Just granite, polished and cold under his fingers. No cracks, no doors, but he looked at his watch. 3:07 a.m. exactly. And the next morning, another body was found behind a locked bathroom stall at the Blanton Museum. A man in his 60s, face twisted, not in pain, but in sheer disbelief. Alton went down the rabbit hole. Old newspaper records, Capitol maintenance logs, security footage. He found stories dating back to 1930s stories of janitors quitting after hearing a knock during the night shift. In the 40s, a night watchman named Julio Ramos put in for early retirement, citing psychological distress due to architectural anomalies and the deaths they lined up. Whenever there was a knock, someone died within a mile of the dome, no exceptions. Different ages, backgrounds, nationalities. No connection at all. Except the timing. He started sleeping in his office, watching the dome, placing voice recorders, cameras, motion sensors. Nothing picked up the sound, except for him. Every night, same time. One knock. Like a stone fist on a hollow wall. One evening, Alton asked an old archivist, Miss Della, a woman with bird-bone hands and cloudy eyes, what she knew. She didn't blink. He's still up there, she said. Who? Alton asked, though he already felt the answer in his bones. The man who laid the last stone. They sealed him in when they finished the dome, alive. He laughed, nervously. She didn single quotes T. according to Capitol folklore. When the dome was completed in 1888, one stone mason went missing. No body, no note. Just gone. His name was Jacob Ellison, a man known for working late, drinking early, and muttering things under his breath in languages no one else recognized. The rumor was he found something during construction, some chamber that shouldn't have been there. And whatever it was, it didn't let him leave. Alton pulled up old blueprints, compared them to the current structure. There was a 6-foot void and empty space near the dome's inner wall that didn't exist in modern schematics. No access, no hatch, just sealed granite. And every night, the knock came from there. One night, Alton brought a hammer and a small chisel. He stood under the rotunda at 2:58 a.m., staring up at the ornate ceiling, heart thudding like a drumbeat. At 3:06, the air shifted. Got cold, heavy, the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache. At 3:07, the knock came, but this time it wasn't. Once. It was twice. 2 deep, heavy knocks. Boom. And Alton whispered, "Who's there?" The next morning, Alton didn't show up for his shift. They found him slumped in his office chair. No visible injuries, but his brain was gone. Not splattered, not exploded, just gone. His skull was intact, but inside there was only thick gray sludge, like it had been stirred. The coroner sealed the report. The department wrote it off as an aneurysm, but the night staff knew better. A Capitol janitor named Ray saw something on the security camera feed that night. Just a flicker, a frame or two, before the camera shut off. A shadow near the dome wall. A tall, crooked man with a heavy jaw, eyes like coal pits, and hands far too long, pressed flat against the inside of the rotunda wall. After Alton's death, they changed the rules. No more single shifts past 2 a.m., no more sleeping near the dome. They hung heavy red curtains around the rotunda during construction, claiming renovation. But that was 5 years ago. The curtains never came down. Last month, the knocking returned. Every night, without fail. Still at 3:07. But last Friday, the knock came 3 times. And 3 people died downtown before dawn. One was a child in a stroller. One was a protester at Republic Square. One was a pregnant woman who simply collapsed while jogging, less than 2 blocks from the Capitol. The newspapers don't connect them. But if you know the sound, if you've heard the knock, you start counting. People say the man in the dome isn't a man anymore. He's become something else, something patient, something that was sealed inside with no name, no God, and no sunlight. And now, piece by piece, he's loosening the stonework from the inside, 1 knock for each soul taken. 2 knocks means he's growing stronger. 3 knocks means he's waking up. And if you ever hear 4, you won't live long enough to understand what's coming. When Bobby Travers moved into the Leonora Arms, it was because he had no place else to go. The apartment wasn't in good shape. Hell, it wasn't even technically livable. Peeling paint curled from the corners of the ceiling like sunburnt skin. The floor groaned like an old man getting out of bed, and there were roaches bold enough to walk across his boots while he sat on the toilet. But the price was right. The landlord, a man named Rivas who lived in the basement like a spider in its web, told Bobby with a crooked grin, "It's not the Ritz, but it's shelter, and she don't bite." Rivas lied. The building had been beautiful once. You could tell from the details, even through the decay. Crown molding, Art Deco light fixtures, wide windowsills, marble tile that had turned yellow with age, but you could still see the ghost of elegance underneath. They said it was built in 1929 and had survived hurricanes, blackouts, and the rise and fall of a dozen owners. But time had a way of rotting everything, even concrete and brick, and Leonora Arms had become a tomb for the forgotten. Montrose itself was gentrifying. You could get artisanal coffee 5 blocks down, and there was a boutique hotel where a strip club used to be, but Leonora Arms remained like a rotten tooth in a smiling mouth. Ignored, avoided, but stubbornly still there. The day Bobby moved in, Rivas handed him the keys and muttered, "Don't mind the sounds. This place talks sometimes. Old buildings do that." Bobby didn't ask what that meant. He was too tired. He just walked out of a 3-year relationship that ended with his girlfriend leaving him for a sculptor in Taos and taking the dog. His job at the bar was on its last leg too. New owners, new policies, younger bartenders with tighter shirts. He figured the crying started 2 weeks and at first. He thought it was a baby in the building. A soft gasping sob that seemed to flow through the pipes late at night. Always around 2 a.m., always fading. In and out like someone twisting a dial on an old radio. The strange thing was, Leonora Arms didn't have many tenants. Maybe 4 or 5 people scattered across 6 floors. He never saw a child. Never heard the daytime sounds that came with them. No toys, no laughter, no yelling. The sound came from the bathroom wall, just behind the cracked tile above the toilet. Bobby pressed his ear against it one night and nearly screamed. It was close, too close. The sobbing vibrated through the tile. You could feel it in your molars. He yanked his head back, heart pounding, and told himself he was tired. Overtired. Working too many shifts, not eating right. He went to Rivas the next morning. "There's someone crying in the pipes," Bobby said. Trying to keep his voice calmed out, Rivas just gave him a long look. Then he said, "You hear her already? She likes you." "Who?" Rivas didn't answer. Just pulled out a faded blue folder from behind his desk and flipped it open. Inside were old, brittle maintenance records. Rust-colored water stains had warped the paper, but the line drawings were still clear. One floor plan showed the plumbing lines through the building. Rivas tapped a pipe near the top left corner. This one was sealed in '98. Child drowned in the bathtub. Mother left the tap on, took a bottle of pills, and lay down to die. Didn't die fast enough. Heard the girl screaming and tried to save her, but she couldn't get up. Screamed till her throat tore. Neighbors heard her. That's when they called 911. Found her holding the girl. Water still running. Bobby stared at the drawing. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because that pipe, the one she died in, runs behind your bathroom wall." Bobby didn't sleep that night. At exactly 2:11 a.m., the crying started again. This time it was clearer. Less like a baby. More like a young girl. He sat on the edge of his tub, holding a flashlight, and stared at the spot on the wall where the tile had hairline cracks. The sound wasn't just sobbing now. There were words. "Help me. I'm sorry. It's cold." The flashlight slipped from his hand and rolled across the floor. The next few days, Bobby changed. He stopped going to work. He let dishes pile up. The fridge light blew and he didn't replace it. He kept the bathroom door closed during the day, but unlocked it every night before bed, like a ritual. At 2:11, he'd wake up and listen to the crying. Sometimes it stopped after a few minutes. Sometimes it went on until dawn. He couldn't explain why he felt drawn to it. There was something in the voice, raw, aching. It wasn't scary. Not. At first, it was sad. Then, the bleeding started. Tiny red droplets on the bathroom floor. Not fresh blood. More like rust. They seeped out from under the wall tiles and pooled near the toilet. Bobby wiped them up, thinking it was some kind of old pipe rot, but the spots came back. Every night. Always around the same time. One night, he turned on the tap just to see what would happen. The pipes moaned. Then spat out water the color of tea. It stank like something had died deep in the plumbing. He turned it off. The next morning, there was something written on his mirror in steam. "Let me owe you." That's when he called a plumber. The man came, took one look at the corroded lines and shook his head. "These pipes don't go anywhere. You've got a dry stack, man. Ain't been water in here in decades." Bobby showed him the water, the blood, the crying. But nothing happened while the man was there. No sound, no stains. Just silence. The plumber left muttering about mold hallucinations. Rivas wouldn't come up anymore. Just slipped rent notices under the door and told Bobby not to talk to her too much. "She gets clingy," he said, eyes sunken. "Wants company." Then came the night Bobby tried to record the crying. He set his phone up at 2 a.m., camera aimed at the wall. He left it and went to the kitchen. Made coffee, sat, waited. When he checked the recording in the morning, the phone was dead. Battery drained. But when he plugged it in and watched the footage, he dropped the mug. It wasn't just sound. The tiles had shifted, opened, and a face had come through. Pale, small, mouth wide, eyes black, wet hair clinging to her forehead. She whispered something to the camera and vanished. He replayed it 100 times. Each time, the face moved closer. He tried moving out, packed 2 bags, called a friend, took the elevator down, and it worked for the first time in years. But when the doors opened in the lobby, it was dark and cold. And the walls were wet. Rivas was waiting near the front door, smiling with eyes that didn't blink. "She won't let you leave now. You talk too long. You listen too close." The elevator doors closed behind Bobby and wouldn't open again. Now no one lives in 2B, not officially. But sometimes tenants on the 3rd floor say they hear someone walking, dragging, sobbing. Rivas is gone. The building is set for demolition next spring, but the crew that came to assess it, one of them went into 2B and never came out. They found his boots by the sink and a message on the mirror, "Stay, I'm lonely." And at 2:11 a.m., the crying continues. Not a child's voice anymore, a man's, hoarse, broken. Begging. And behind the walls, the pipes, long dead, long dry, begin to weep again. They say you can't die from television, that it's just light and noise, just illusion. But on Elm Street in Dallas, the illusion kills. It started with Mr. Hobson. Nobody really noticed when it happened. He was 78 and lived alone, in a red brick duplex with ivy strangling the gutters. A Vietnam vet with bad knees and an addiction to scratch-offs. The kind of guy you nod at and keep walking. The city said it was a heart attack, natural causes. Except no one could explain why every electronic device in his house had melted from the inside out. No fire, just warped plastic and a stench like burnt teeth. 3 days later, it was Jenna Price, young, mid-20s, freelance web designer lived in the condo above the antique shop. Her friends say she'd been having nightmares, real ones. Woke up screaming about faces in the snow, voices in her hair. Said she kept seeing something in the static of her Roku screen. Something that smiled when she blinked. She unplugged everything. Her laptop, her Alexa, even the microwave. But they say her iPad turned itself on at 12:01 a.m. and stayed lit until dawn, displaying a single frame of a video feed. A room with no walls, no floor, just faces, rows of them, staring out like pressed. Flowers and static. By the time Clay moved into the neighborhood, people didn't talk about it anymore. They just acted like things were normal. They waved, smiled a little too long, avoided mentioning the hour between 12 o'clock and 1 a.m. Clay was a songwriter. Not famous, not even local famous. Just a guy with a busted guitar and a failed marriage, who figured the cheap rent meant bad plumbing, not bad omens. The apartment above the laundromat on Elm was cold and smelled like rust and mildew. But it was quiet. Clay liked quiet. He had a habit of leaving the TV on while he dozed. He didn't care what was playing, just needed the flicker and murmur to drown out his thoughts. The first night, the screen turned snowy at midnight. Clay blinked, reached for the remote. A shadow moved across the static, slow, deliberate. Then a face. It wasn't a jump scare. It was something worse. It was real, familiar, in that awful, half-remembered way, like a dream you forgot but your body still feared. A man, mid-40s, lips cracked and bleeding, eyes sunken but locked on Clay's. Clay froze. The man's mouth moved. No sound came from the TV, but Clay heard the words, "You see me now." He unplugged the TV. The face lingered for a heartbeat before the screen died. Then silence. He didn't sleep that night. The next day, he asked his neighbor, Miss Keller, about the odd static. She was in her 50s, wore old perfume, and stared. "Too long. You shouldn't ask questions, Clay," she said without smiling. "They notice when you ask." He thought she was just eccentric. Probably nuts. That night, he took the batteries out of the remote, shut off the breaker, and turned his TV to face the wall. Still at 12 o'clock on the dot, his phone screen lit up. White snow. Then a flickering image. The girl, maybe 8 years. Old, water-matted hair. Pale lips. Her eyes were wrong, like someone had erased the middle of her. Clay dropped the phone. The screen stayed on. "You're not supposed to look," she whispered from nowhere. The apartment was ice cold. He sprinted. Outside, barefoot, shirtless, heart hammering. He expected the street to be dead, but the neighbors were all standing there. Every single one of them, silent, still, staring at their own houses, their own screens. Their eyes wide and unblinking. And that's when the static began to hum. Not from devices, from the air. Like the sky was a broken antenna and the whole city was picking up a frequency it was never supposed to hear. Back in his apartment, the TV still unplugged burst to life. The girl's face now closer. "You let them in," she said. Her smile cracked wide, revealing too many teeth. The walls pulsed like lungs. The floor vibrate. And then, from the corners of the screen, hands began to emerge. Not digital. Not tricks of light. Real. Twitching, clawing, peeling themselves out like birth in reverse. Clay screamed. No one heard. No one came. In the morning, his apartment was empty. The guitar lay snapped in half. His phone was found on the floor. Screen charred, camera still recording. 17 minutes of static. At the 13-minute mark, the camera caught his face. Eyes rolled back, mouth agape, staring toward the closet. No signs of struggle. No prints, no body. But if you drive down Elm Street today, if you stand there around midnight and dare to look into a dark window, you might see a flicker. You might hear a whisper in the snow. And if you see a man with a cracked smile and a child clinging to his back, look away. Because once they know you're watching, once they see you seeing them, it's only a matter of time. After all, Dallas has always loved its broadcast. And now, so do they. The first lie they tell you at the Alamo is that you've seen everything. Tourists from Wisconsin, families from Lubbock, middle school field trips with name tags and clipboards, they all wander through the same scrubbed and spotlighted path. The mission walls are kept just cracked enough to feel authentic, and the tour guides wear smiles as carefully ironed as their khaki uniforms. But there's something beneath the surface of San Antonio, literally, that no one talks about. Not because it's a secret, but because it should be forgotten. Leonard Barrow didn't come to the Alamo to be part of history. He came for a job. After his wife left with the kids and the furniture, he needed something steady. He got the night shift, cleaning up after the day's mess. Mopping, sweeping, and when necessary, clearing out the occasional drunk local who thought the Alamo was a good place to impress a date. Leonard wasn't a believer. Not in ghosts, not in God, not even in himself most days. He wore thick-soled boots and smoked menthols behind the old bell tower when no one was around. The job was dull and easy. Until that one night in August. It was late, nearly 2:30 a.m. The tourists were long gone, and the cicadas outside had fallen quiet. That's when he felt it. A draft inside the storeroom. Just a whisper of cold across the back of his neck, like someone had cracked a window in January. But there were no windows in that part of the building. Just mops, old crates, and the smell of pine-sol. He followed it. He moved the crates, shifted a shelf, and there it was. A perfect square, about 4 feet across, hidden under a rubber mat and sealed tight with 4 brass bolts, each one bearing a symbol he didn't recognize. Circles. Crosses. Something like a wheel with teeth. He should have called someone. His boss, the police, hell, even a priest. But he didn't. Curiosity isn't just dangerous. It's damn irresistible when your life feels like it's circling the drain. He fetched his crowbar, pried open the bolts one by one, and pulled. Trapdoor groaned, reluctant like something alive. Beneath it, a ladder disappeared into pitch black. He went down. The air changed with every step. By the time his boots touched the ground, the warmth of Texas was gone. In its place was a chill that belonged to deep places, abandoned mines, crypts, ancient wells. He turned on his flashlight. The beam danced along stone walls, but not the kind from the mission. These were older, the bricks cruder, made by hand. The corridor was narrow, forcing him to hunch. Water dripped somewhere unseen. The walls were damp and smelled like iron. The deeper he went, the more he felt it, that tight pull behind his eyes, like pressure building behind a dam. Then came the symbols, carved into the walls, hundreds of them, in spirals and clusters. Some looked like animals with too many legs. Others like letters written by someone dreaming of a language that never existed. Every time his light hit them, the shadows moved wrong. That's when he heard a drip. Then again. Louder. Slower. Drip. He rounded the corner and found it. A chamber round, about 20 feet across. The walls were blackened as if scorched. Bones were everywhere, not just scattered, stacked. Femurs and ribs laid out with architectural precision, forming a macabre lattice from floor to ceiling. And in the center stood a slab of stone. Carved into its surface was a symbol so intricate, so hideously symmetrical, it made his eyes water. On the slab was a body, or something pretending to be one. The uniform was that of a soldier, old, stained. Colonial blue, one boot gone. Fingers curled inward like dried roots. The skin looked petrified, but the chest moved, barely, up and down, slow as the tide, and then it opened its eyes, not like a person. Not even like an animal. Too many pupils, concentric circles. No whites, no blink, just awareness, raw and predatory. Leonard couldn't scream, not because he was brave, but because something else spoke first. Not with sound, but in his head, a voice. Like rusted hinges and boiling tar, you are not the first. You will not be the last. The treaty is broken. The debt must be paid. The walls shook. From every tunnel, every crack, every tiny opening came the sound of boots. Hundreds of them, marching in rhythm. Getting closer, Leonard turned and ran. He didn't look back. The ladder was longer than he remembered. He climbed like the devil himself was behind him. When he slammed the trapdoor shut, it didn't want to stay closed. He had to sit on it, pressing his full weight down until the cold finally seeped away. He sealed it with duct tape and bleached jugs and whatever he could find. Then he left the Alamo. He walked until morning. Got picked up near the freeway, barefoot and shaking. Spent the next 6 months in a state hospital, mute and drawing circles on his walls with crayon. When he finally spoke again, it was to a nurse. He whispered, "The war never ended. They're still fighting. They're just ... waiting." Today, tourists still walk those halls. They take selfies near the cannons. They eat chili dogs in the courtyard. And they never notice the cold spot in the back of the storeroom. Not unless they stay a little too late. Not unless they hear the footsteps under their feet, getting closer, always closer. And not unless the second basement decides ... remembers them. Back before the stockyards were just for tourists and overpriced barbecue. Before Fort Worth was a collection of glass towers and ghost towns made of old brick and good intentions, it was cattle country. Real cattle. Real cowboys. Real blood. The Chisholm Trail ran right through it, and the city grew fat on the backs of longhorns driven up from the Mexican border, up past the Rio Grande, through the dusty, sun-damned flatlands. Some say the earth remembers. Others say the dead don't. Like being forgotten, Warren McKinley didn't care for ghost stories. He was the kind of man who chewed coffee grounds when he ran out of instant, who slept with the fan on even in winter because silence made him itch. He'd been a guard, a wrangler, and once in his prime, a rodeo legend. Fort Worth knew his name. Back in '81, when he rode Black Spiral for a full 10 seconds, walked away with a busted collarbone and a belt buckle the size of a hubcap, but glory fades. Muscles sag. Breath shortens. The years slip away like moonlight on water. He took the night watch job at the Western Trails Heritage Plaza because he needed something to do besides wait for death. And for the first few months, it was good, quiet, predictable. The statue heard dozens of life-sized longhorns in bronze. Frozen mid-stride in a permanent stampede stood watch with him under yellow floodlights like loyal ghosts. He used to talk to them sometimes, but then came the heat wave. Late July, and the pavement steamed like it had a fever. The air shimmered with a chemical haze, and everything felt dry, brittle, like the whole city might snap if you stepped wrong. That's when the bells started. It was just past midnight. Warren was halfway through a lukewarm thermos of black coffee and a crumpled Louis L'Amour paperback when he heard the first jingle. Just a soft metallic tinkle, like a wind chime stirred by breath. But there was no wind. Not that night. The air was still heavy, unmoving. He thought it might have been some prank kids tossing a bell over the fence, trying to mess with the old man. He stood up, cracked his back, and walked out into the plaza. The statues looked the same. The shadows were where they should be. But then he heard it again, this time louder, and it was coming from the far edge of the plaza, near the slope that led down to the old water feature dry now, choked with dead leaves and cigarette butts. That's where he saw her, a girl. Couldn't have been more than 12 or 13. Pale, barefoot, standing on the back of one of the bronze steers. Her dress was old-fashioned white, maybe once, but now stained the color of old teeth. She stood still, arms by her side, face hidden under a curtain of tangled black hair. "Hey," Warren called out, annoyed more than alarmed. "You're not supposed to be up there." She didn't move. He took a step closer, then another. The bell around the steer's neck jingled softly. Though the statue hadn't moved an inch, then the steer turned its head. It was slow, like watching rusted machinery grind into motion. Metal. Groaning. The eyes blank and polished glinted red in the plaza lights. And the girl turned too. She had no eyes, just two cavernous pits, blacker than shadow, blacker than forgetting. Warren stumbled back, heart hammering in his chest like a jackrabbit in a sack. And then she opened her mouth. It wasn't a mouth. Not really. It stretched and twisted and peeled open like a tear in the fabric of things, and the sound that came. It wasn't a voice. It was bells. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. All ringing at once in a shrill, chaotic chorus that shot straight into Warren's skull. When he woke up, he was lying face down in the dirt beside the plaza fountain. The girl was gone. The statues were still again. His radio crackled with static, and his thermos was shattered at his feet. He didn't tell anyone, because who would believe him? An old man with liver spots and shaky hands, telling tales about statues that moved and ghost girls with mouths full of bells? But the bells kept coming. Every night, they followed him home. They echoed in his hallway, rang in his dreams, hummed behind the static on his old TV. He started seeing shapes in the corner's horn shadows, something large and slow moving just beyond the edge of the light. He began walking with a limp again, even though his knees hadn't hurt in years. His fridge magnets fell off one by one. Mirrors cracked without reason. One night, he didn't show up to work. They found his apartment empty. No sign of struggle. Just his boots on the porch, filled with black water, and the faint smell of burnt hay in the air. He wasn't the last. A janitor at City Hall disappeared next, then a valet downtown. Then a couple taking selfies with the Longhorn statues after. Dark, all gone. All of them last seen near the plaza. Now, folks say the phantom herd rides at night. Not on asphalt or dirt, but through parking lots, alleys, shopping malls. You can't always see them, but if you hear the bells, you know they're close. They're not hers anymore. That's what the stories say. She lost control, or gave it up, or maybe never had it to begin with, because the herd isn't made of cattle anymore. It's made of the lost, of those who followed the bells. And if you hear them after midnight in Fort Worth, don't follow. Don't look. Don't listen. Just leave. Because once they've got your scent, they always come back for the next one. They found Leo Canone's truck idling just past mile marker 52 on I-10 west of El Paso. Doors wide open, headlights on, and the cab empty, no blood, no signs of a struggle, no tracks in the dust. Just his half-drunk thermos still steaming. Man was gone, vanished like a whisper and a scream. Folks around El Paso still talk about it, mostly in murmurs and late-night hushed tones at truck stops. Because Leo wasn't the first to disappear on that stretch of highway, and he damn sure wasn't the last. Leo was a loner, not because he had to be, but because the world made more sense in his rearview mirror. He hauled drywall, PVC piping, sometimes livestock feed, anything to keep the wheels moving and the miles between him and his past stacked high like poker chips. He'd been driving since '98, knew every diner, every rest stop, every shortcut. Between Tucson and Dallas. But he didn't know about mile marker 52. Not really. It was the kind of spot no one paid attention to. No gas stations, no exits, no shoulder wide enough to pull off. A jagged rise of desert on either side, a thin spine of road that felt more like a scar. Leo had passed it 100 times, maybe more. But this time, he was running late, thanks to a busted radiator hose outside Deming. He'd patched it with duct tape and spit, filled up at a trucker's oasis that smelled like piss and diesel, and floored it, hoping to hit El Paso before dawn. It was 2:11 a.m. when his GPS blinked. Not the usual freeze, not the spinning wheel of death. Just blinked off. When it came back, the road was gone, not the map. The road. The screen showed blue sky and tan desert, no lines. No route, just a pulsing dot where Leo should be, sitting. In the middle of nowhere, going nowhere fast. He glanced around. 1 to 10 stretched ahead, dark and lonely. He was still on the road, still moving. He hit the side of the GPS with his palm, like that would help, and cursed under his breath. Then the CB crackled static, faint at first, then building like a storm rolling in. The voice came through at 2:14. Just one word. Stop. He thought it was a prank. Some punk playing games with a bootleg rig. He reached for the dial, about to shut it off, when the headlights showed up. At first, he thought they were deer. That weird desert mirage lights floating above the sand. But no. These were headlights, 2x2, bright and old-fashioned. Not LED, not halogen. More like something from the 60s, yellow and wide, flickering like candles in a breeze. They weren't on the road. They were off to the side, in the dirt, in the air, just hanging there, 10 feet up. No cars, no engines, just lights. Then the Peterbilt shuddered. No warning, just a jolt like it had hit a pothole the size of a grave. Leo jerked the wheel. The truck swerved but didn't flip. He managed to pull it straight and slammed on the brakes. The rig groaned to a stop. Everything went silent. That's when he noticed the sound, or the lack of it. No cicadas. No wind. No hum of tires cooling on asphalt. Just silence so thick it squeezed his skull. He stepped out of the cab, boots hitting the gravel like thunderclaps. The headlights were gone. Now, just pitch black desert, the kind that makes you feel like God forgot this part of the world when he spun it together. He circled around the truck, flashlight in hand, sweeping it across the dirt. That's when he saw the footprints, not his, small, barefoot, like a child's, but there were too many toes. 7 on each foot, and the prints circled the truck. One set. Over and over and over. As if something had been walking round and round his Peterbilt, waiting. The wind picked up, except it wasn't wind. It was whispering. No words, just soft. Sibilance, like someone telling secrets through teeth. Leo looked up. The desert sky, once clear and sharp, was now thick with clouds that hadn't been there minutes ago. Clouds shaped like hands, reaching. And in the distance, just beyond mile marker 52, he saw lights again. Hundreds of them. They weren't car lights now. They were different: red, green, blue. They blinked like signals, like warnings. But from what? Or who? He backed toward the cab. The flashlight flickered, died. The truck's engine coughed once, twice, then went dead too. The CB hissed again. This time, the voice was clearer. You're here. You stopped. Leo didn't wait. He jumped into the cab, locked the doors, and slammed the ignition. Nothing. Then the windows fogged from the outside. All of them. Thick white mist that smeared like breath. Fingers began tapping against the glass. Not one set. Dozens. Leo screamed. Pounded the horn. It didn't work. Then silence again. He looked to his left, and there it was. The man. If you could call it a man. It stood beside the driver's door, not touching it, just staring, face covered in TV static. The body shimmered like heat waves, off pavement. But the worst part was the smile. It moved, not a mouth. The smile moved around the face, sliding like oil, twitching from ear to ear, flickering across the noise. It pointed toward the front. Leo turned. The road was gone, completely. In its place was black desert, stretching forever. The kind of darkness that didn't end in dawn. They never found him. The logbook ended at 2:16 a.m. A sheriff's cruiser found the truck at 2:31. Lights on, engine cold, GPS fried. They searched 10 square miles, brought in dogs, drones, heat-seekers. Nothing. All that remained were those weird prints, 7 toes each, encircling the truck, burned into the dirt like brand marks. Now, truckers who know the stories, real truckers, not the greenhorns, say they don't drive past mile marker 52 after 2 a.m., not anymore. They say if you do, your radio might pick up whispers, your GPS might vanish, and the headlights, those wrong, floating headlights, might show up, drifting through the desert. If they do, don't stop, because the road doesn't end at El Paso. It ends in something much, much older. Something that was here before the first wheel, before the first road, before the first man. The land out past the cotton belt of Lubbock is flat and mean, a dusty nowhere that stretches like an old man's yawn, cracked and scorched by too many sunrises and too few rains. If you keep going past the abandoned rail spur and the dead pecan orchard, you'll find it leaning like a drunk against the wind, half sunk in prairie grass and silence. A silo. Just one. Big, ugly, concrete gray. Not a fancy new one either. This one's from another time. One of those things that looks like it was never built so much as dropped there by something ancient and done with us. Ask any old-timer in Lubbock about it and they'll squint, shake their head once, and change the subject to football or water rights or the cost of diesel. Not because they forgot, because they remember. Too well. It started back in '73. Not a good year. The rains came late, the wind came early, and something under the dirt started to shift. Henry Whitlock was the first to notice it. He owned the land then, ran a wheat farm with his wife Vera and their 3 boys. Honest people. Salt of the earth, hard workers. Henry had a new combine, a dog named Trapper, and a streak of bad luck stretching back to his father's war wounds. That year, the wheat came in wrong. Not stunted or diseased, just wrong. Off color, not gold but almost grayish. When the sun hit it, the stalks shimmered like oil in a puddle. Henry said it smelled like rust. Vera wouldn't go near the silo after the second load. Said the grain whispered when it slid down the chute, and it wasn't just wind. Said it sounded like words. Pleading ones. By the end of October, the farmhands had quit. Said the silo wasn't right, that something moved in there at night. One kid name was Curtis, maybe 16, swore he saw fingers push through the grain when he opened the top hatch. Just for a second, just enough to freeze him solid. He ran all the way back to town barefoot and babbling. On Halloween, Henry vanished. Vera said he'd gone out to check the southern fence line just after supper. Never came back. The dog returned. The next morning with blood on its paws and its eyes rolled back, whining like a newborn. A sheriff's deputy found Henry's hat near the silo door. Nothing else. Not a trail, not a boot print, just grain husks. They tried to dredge the silo with ropes and lights. No body. But one of the deputies, a guy named Morales, swore the grain wasn't dry. It clung to the rope like wet skin. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Vera started hearing things at night. Not coyotes or wind, but Henry. Calling her, begging her to open the hatch. saying he was cold, hungry. She went out there every night for a week, flashlight in hand, whispering into the metal until her voice cracked. Then she stopped talking altogether. They found her in the pantry, eyes blank, fingernails worn down to the quick from clawing at sacks of flour. The Whitlock boys were shipped off to an aunt in Amarillo. One of them hung himself in a motel bathroom 20 years later. Left a note. That said, it still knows my name. They shut the place down. Boarded it up, but the whispering never stopped. The screams came later. It started as a dare. Teenagers with too much Red Bull and not enough sense. A game. Walk up to the silo. Knock 3 times. Press your ear to the hatch. Wait. Some heard breathing. Some heard their own name whispered in a voice that sounded like it was underwater. One girl fainted. Another pissed herself. A boy named Kyle Rhodes never made it back to the truck. His friends found his shirt folded neatly by the edge of the field, his belt looped through the sleeve like it was hung up to dry. No footprints. Just a faint trail of drag marks leading toward the silo. Every few years, someone tries to tear it down. Developers, land surveyors, ghost hunters with GoPros, and confidence, but nothing ever comes of it. Machines fail. Drones drop out of the sky. Last crew left behind a bulldozer with its cab melted from the inside out. Said the crew chief went home to Tyler and locked himself in his attic. Shot through the roof. Cops said he'd carved the words "It remembers" into the walls in 12 places. Then there was the sound. At harvest time, always around the new moon, people hear it. A scream that starts low and builds, like something buried under 50 tons of dirt and secrets trying to claw its way to the sky. Farmers in the neighboring fields report grain shifting in their own silos, empty silos. One guy near Slatton swore he saw his wheat start to bleed. Called it quits and moved to Oregon. No one's harvested the Whitlock fields in decades, and yet the grass never grows there. Nothing does, and the silo. It stands, leaning, waiting. Last thing. Last year, a grad student from Texas Tech wrote her thesis on rural horror myths. Decided to investigate the Whitlock place. Camped out for a weekend with a parabolic mic and 3 solar-powered cameras. She made one call to her advisor on Sunday morning. Whispered into the phone, "It's not a ghost, it's a mouth." No one's heard from her since, but the silo? It still screams. The first time Sam McClendon heard about the revival tent, he was 7 years old, curled up in the back of his grandma's, screened-in porch with a melted grape popsicle running down his arm and the cicadas screaming like broken violins in the heat. It was the summer of 1984, and the air had a bite to it. Not cold, not stormy, but wrong, like something spoiled under your bed that you couldn't find. Grandma May had the radio turned off, which meant she was about to tell a story. She only ever did that when something in the air told her to. "Listen close, Sammy," she said, her voice thin as worn cloth, "because I'm only telling you once. You know about the dust, don't you?" He nodded. Everyone in Waco knew. About the dust. It came every summer, late July, turning the sky brown and thick. Made the cattle restless. Made the air taste like iron and ash. "Well, there's a church that rides the wind in that dust," she said, rocking gently. "Big. Red tent, like the old revival ones. Used to be you'd see folks go in for healing. Now it just takes." "Takes what?" Sam asked. She looked out past the mosquito netting and said, "Whatever it needs. Sometimes it's a drifter, sometimes a kid, sometimes a soul too tired to care. That should have been the end of it. But stories like that, they sit inside. A child. Like a seed, waiting. And when the wind comes just right, they grow into something big and ugly that you can't dig out." Sam grew up and moved away Dallas. Then Amarillo, Then 3 failed marriages and 2 bankrupt small businesses later, back to Waco. It was 2007. His grandma was long dead, buried under a cracked headstone out behind the First Baptist Church. But the town was the same. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that has something buried in it. You got a job fixing evac systems, dust in your lungs or not. Waco summers would kill a man without cool air and rented a 2-room shack on the edge of a cattle ranch. It had a bad floor, worse roof, and windows that creaked in the wind like old bones. But it was cheap, and he figured he'd keep moving anyway. Until the first storm hit Dot, it started like any other clouds on the horizon. Low pressure, dogs barking at nothing. But this time, the dust came early, redder, thicker. Like the ground itself was bleeding. Sam was out on a call south of town, fixing a unit for some shut-in war vet named Bud Rollins. Bud had 1 eye, 1 working lung, and a habit of talking. Like the world owed him something it was never going to give back. Sam was halfway through soldering a copper line when Bud pointed out the window. "You see it?" Bud said, voice low. Sam looked, and there it was, a tent. Red canvas, big enough to house 50, maybe more. It stood out in the flat, dry field like a wound. No tracks. No trucks. Just there. Bud lit a cigarette with a trembling hand. That son of a bitch comes back every year, but earlier now. Like it's hungry. Sam didn't believe in ghost stories. He believed in overdue bills and loneliness, in engines and pipe tape. But that night, the wind kicked up and the dust wrapped around his house like it had a grudge. And just before he closed the window, he swore he heard musical gospel, scratchy and warbling like it was playing from under 6 feet of soil. That night, he dreamed of his grandma standing in a river of dust with her skin peeled back and her eyes white as polished bone. She opened her mouth to scream but only sang instead, "Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb?" He woke to silence. And then the knocked out 1 slow, deliberate knock on his front door. He didn't answer it. The next morning the news broke. Bud Rollins was gone. No signs of forced entry. No struggle. Just his wheelchair sitting in the center of his living room and the front door open. Windblown dirt on the welcome mat like footprints leading out. People talked, of course, but only behind closed doors, in whispers. The city folks blamed it. On coyotes, heat stroke, maybe a break-in. But the ones who'd lived in Waco long enough, the ones who remembered the boy in 58, or the girl in 72 who walked into the tent and never came out, they just started carrying rosaries again. Tacking up crosses. Staying inside at sundown. Sam couldn't stop thinking about it. Every night he saw the tent, felt the heat through the sheets, smelled the dust. It wasn't normal dust, not like the kind that clings to your boots. It had weight to it like ash and grave dirt and secrets. And it clung to his lungs. One night, he drove out there. He told himself he just wanted to see it again, up close. Maybe tear it down, prove it was some sick prank. But the tent wasn't made of fabric. Not really. Up close, the red looked like flesh, tanned and stretched tight. The seams pulsed. There were handprints in the dust around it, some small, some too big to be human. And the flap hung, open like a mouth waiting to swallow. He took 1 step forward, and someone called his name. It was his grandma's voice. He ran. Didn't stop until he was back in town. Panting, dust in his teeth, throat raw from screaming. But no one saw anything. No one heard the music. Just him. Like it had singled him out. The tent vanished the next morning, but something stayed. His reflection started doing things his body didn't, blinking when he didn't, moving a fraction too. Late, he started waking up with dust under his fingernails even when he hadn't been outside. And every now and then, he heard music from the drains. By the time the next July came, he'd stopped fighting it. He didn't lock his doors. He didn't draw the blinds. And when the storm rolled in hot and loud and heavy, he walked out. Into the dust like a man coming home. They never found him. Only a shoe. Upright in a field, and footprints leading towards something that wasn't there anymore. But it always comes back. Always. The salt house wasn't on any map you'd find at the gas station. You wouldn't spot it from the boardwalk, and even if you lived on the island your whole life, it might slip from your memory like a dream you almost remembered. But it was always there, just past where Seawall Boulevard turned to broken shells and silence. Past the abandoned pier that smelled like fish rot and diesel. Tucked behind sea oats and two hunched live oaks so twisted they looked like they were trying to crawl away. They called it the Salt House because every inch of it seemed to sweat salt. The shutters crusted white. The doorknob left a residue on your fingers. And the air around it always carried that harsh brine scent that didn't match the weather, like the ocean itself had taken a deep breath and exhaled through the gay windows. Ray Halbrook didn't believe in ghosts. He was from Houston. Grew up believing hurricanes were just bad luck and flood insurance was a scam. When the Salt House showed up in a foreclosure listing, 2 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, ocean view, he didn't hesitate. He thought it was a miracle. Ellie, his wife, was suspicious from the start. The price was too low. The photos didn't show the front door, just the house from angles that looked careful, crooked, like someone had wanted to show it without really showing it. But Ray needed a fresh start after getting laid off from the refinery. Ellie needed air. And their daughter, Marin, needed somewhere quiet to start kindergarten. They moved in during late August, just before hurricane season. The house was all ready. Watching them, the first night was quiet. Too quiet, Ellie said. No gulls, no wind, just the creak of the floorboards like bones settling. The house didn't smell like mildew or age, it smelled sharp. Salt and rust. Ray thought it might be the old plumbing. That first week, Ellie found tiny footprints on the hallway tile each morning, too small for Marin and trailing wet sand. She thought Ray was playing a prank. Ray thought it was a plumbing issue again. Marin said it was the window girl who came at night to look in on her toys. There were too many windows. Even on move-in day, they noticed that. Ray had studied the listing photo's 15 windows max, but when he counted now, there were 23. He made a joke about hurricane repairs, called it Galveston's version of cosmetic surgery. But every night, he swore there was one more than the day before. The upstairs hallway had a window now dead center of the wall, staring straight out at the Gulf. He didn't remember it from yesterday. By September, Ellie had started closing all the curtains by 7 p.m. Not for the neighbors, there were none left on that stretch of road. They'd driven past vacant homes, porches sinking, hurricane boards. Nailed permanent over windows. No, Ellie did it because the windows had started to reflect things that weren't in the room. Ray brushed it off. Salt does strange things to glass. But he didn't argue when she asked him to board them up. He didn't argue when she started sleeping with the bedroom light on. He didn't even argue when she said the house whispered. He heard it too, but he thought it was the old air vents. Marin was the first to change. Her laugh faded. She stopped. Watching cartoons. She spent more time standing in front of the living room window, even when it rained, just watching the sea. Sometimes, Ray would find her drawing figures, stick people with long arms and wide, empty eyes. When asked, she'd say they were the neighbors. Miss Isadora lives upstairs, Marin whispered one night over dinner. She has seaweed in her hair and walks on the ceiling. She misses her daughter. Where'd you hear that name? Ellie asked. She told me, Marin said simply. She said, we're the first ones to stay. Everyone else floats away. Ray checked county records that night. Nothing came up for Isadora. but he found a strange pattern: property transfers every 2 to 5 years. Every family listed, as the last known occupant had left without selling. One was marked deceased, one simply said unaccounted. That night, the house flooded. No rain, no storm. But the entire ground floor had an inch of seawater sloshing over the tile. Ray checked every pipe. Nothing was broken. The next morning, the water was gone, no stains, no puddles. Just dry salt crusted in a ring around the walls. Ellie packed a bag. She didn't say anything, but Ray knew. He was already thinking it too. They never got the chance. That night, the wind came. No warning. Just howling through the window frames like screams in a tin can. The shutters slammed shut on their own, locking with a snap that echoed like gunfire. Ray tried to force the front door. It wouldn't budge. The thermostat dropped to 45 degrees. Ice formed on the inside of the glass. "And upstairs, Marin." Laughed out Ray ran up to find her sitting on the floor, tracing sea creatures in the frost on her window. He turned. Ellie was gone, not out of the room. Just gone, like the house had swallowed her. The police said there was no sign of foul play. Ray told them about the windows, about the water, about Miss Isadora. They asked if he was taking any medication. Stayed in the house, hoping Ellie would come back. But the house had moved on. The windows kept multiplying. Every morning, Ray found a new one, sometimes in places that made no sense. The pantry, the back of a closet, the inside wall of the garage. One day he woke up and found a window in the ceiling above his bed, peering straight down. Something behind the glass blinked and vanished. Marin disappeared in early October. Ray went to make her breakfast and found the kitchen filled with fog, dense, salty, and cold. Her plate sat on the counter, her shoes by the door. Her crayon drawings fluttered from the fridge like falling leaves. The only thing new was a window. Above the sink that hadn't been there yesterday, a child's handprint rested in the condensation on the inside. Ray never left. He tried, drove west again. Got as far as Houston before the road looped like a snake eating itself, and he ended up back at the mailbox with no 0 carved into the wood. The house waited. Now, they say if you drive by after midnight, if you dare to drive that far east on a road that doesn't always exist, you can see Ray standing in the upstairs window, staring down. He doesn't wave. He doesn't blink. And the house? It watches. It counts. It waits for the next storm, the next name, the next window. Angela Mendez had never been to Corpus Christi before. A woman of measured habits and quiet loneliness, she preferred inland places where the wind didn't smell like salt and sadness. But a funeral pulled her there, some distant cousin she barely remembered, an obligation more than grief. She thought maybe the ocean would clear her head. She booked 3 nights at the Ocean Crest Hotel. It was cheap, not quite a dump, but you wouldn't brag about it either. 70s era concrete, the color of old bones, clung to the coast like a barnacle. It had seen better years before hurricanes chewed at its foundations and vandals scarred the lobby walls. But the sign still blinked on and off at night, proud. In a tired kind of way. Ocean Crest, vacancy. At the front desk, the clerk, a thin young man with tired eyes and a badge that said Andy, didn't meet her gaze. When she asked for a quiet room with a view of the water, he tapped on the keyboard for a few seconds longer than necessary, then handed over a keycard. "Room 405, he said. "Elevators to your left." He didn't smile. Angela noticed. The elevator rattled on the way up. It groaned between floors like something being fed through the digestive tract of a giant. When the doors opened, the hallway stretched long and dim, carpet stiff under her shoes, lights buzzing overhead. Room 405 was at the end, next to the fire exit. The card slid through the lock, and the door clicked open. The room was simple. Queen bed, TV, mini fridge humming quietly. But the mirror was wrong. It stood between the dresser and the wall like it had been lowered there by mistake, or by force. Ornate, tall, with a gold-painted frame that curled like vines. Too elegant for a budget hotel. The wood was cracked in places, the paint flaking, but the glass was spotless and strangely vibrant. It caught the light wrong. Too bright when the lamps were on, too dark when they were off. Angela stared into it for a moment, frowning. Her reflection stared back. Nothing unusual. Just a tired woman with eyes slightly too red and lips pressed too tight. She sighed, dropped her bag, and sat on the bed. Her body sank into the mattress like it had been waiting for her. And then, without planning to, she lay back and closed her eyes. When she woke, it was 3:13 a.m. The TV was on, hissing with static, volume turned low. A soft blue light filled the room like moonlight underwater. Angela sat up slowly, unsure why she'd woken at all. The mirror was glowing. Not literally, but catching the TV's glow and stretching it like gauze across the floor. Her reflection was visible in the screen's flicker, but it was off. Her head tilted left. The reflection tilted right. Her eyes widened. The reflection blinked, slowly, and smiled. Angela scrambled to her feet. She blinked once, hard. The reflection reset, normal again. Or seemed to be. But something lingered, a delay between her motions and the mirror's response. Half a second, maybe. A half second of terror. She approached it slowly. Inches away. She could see every detail of her face, every wrinkle, every pore. But behind her reflection in the mirrored version of the room, the curtains moved, slowly, whispering. But the actual curtains behind her stayed still. She turned fast. Nothing. Back to the mirror, and then faces. 5 of them. Maybe 6. Pressed. Behind the glass like old photographs trying to come alive. Pale and desperate. One woman's mouth was open too wide, as if she'd screamed for so long the shape had frozen. A man whose eyes had been stitched shut with fine black thread. A child, weeping blood that pooled on the floor of the mirror room and didn't drip. Angela fell back. Her breath stuttered in her throat. She ran to the door and yanked. Locked. Deadbolt jammed. Her phone had no service. Landline to the front desk spat static. When she turned around again, the mirror showed just her face. But it wasn't hers anymore. Her own reflection now had eyes too large, lips too thin. She mouthed something. Don't sleep, Angela. Backed into the bathroom. There was another mirror above the sink, smaller, cracked across the bottom corner. She looked into it. Her reflection was gone. Just a blank space where her body should be. She heard something. In the bedroom. The mirror creaked. Wood groaning, glass shifting. She stood in the bathroom doorway and saw the surface of the mirror rippling, like someone was pressing from behind. A hand came through first. Pale, wet, fingers spread wide. Then an arm, shoulder, a mouth gasping. Like a fish yanked from water. Angela screamed. She threw a lamp. It shattered, the bulb bursting in a flash. The figure in the mirror sucked back like water pulled down a drain, and just like that, it was a normal mirror again. She sat in the corner of the room until dawn, knees to her chest, staring at the thing. It didn't move again. At 7 a.m., she opened the door. It wasn't locked anymore. She walked past the front desk without speaking, shaking, eyes bloodshot. Andy looked up but didn't ask. He just nodded. Behind him, a black and white photo hung in a frame. It showed the hotel in 1971, a fire truck out front, smoke curling from a 4th-floor window. Room 405. That night, the room was clean. No bags, no ID. No record Angela had ever stayed. Just a faint handprint on the mirror's surface. And when the cleaner paused for a second and glanced at it, there were 7 faces now, and one of them was still trying to scream. It starts with the silence. Not the kind of silence that puts you at peace. The desert at night isn't peaceful. It's hungry. It's old. It listens. Jacob Carlin knew that kind of silence well, but he'd learned to ignore it. After 23 years hauling freight across the old arteries of America, you grow used to the desert whispering your name like it owns you. And maybe it does. He left Oklahoma City around 6:30 in the evening, hauling reefer freight bound for Barstow. The dispatcher told him to expect a dead run, no stops, no pickups. Smooth sailing. He liked it that way. The fewer stops he made, the less time he had to think about what he'd left behind back in Missouri. A wife, a house, a baby boy in a grave that never got flowers. It was just past midnight when he rolled into the outskirts of Amarillo. Route 66 stretched ahead, flat and black like the blade of a buried knife. His headlights pierced the dark for maybe 30 yards before it got swallowed whole. That's when he noticed them, 2 dull red glows ahead, low to the road and spread just too wide for a car. Taillights, but off somehow. They weren't moving, weren't getting closer. Just hovering there, 100 yards down like 2 fireflies. Stuck in tar. He radioed out of habit. Vehicle ahead on 66 near Vega. You moving or sitting, friend? Static. He blinked, rubbed his eyes. When he looked again, the lights were gone. But a minute later, they came back. Not ahead this time. Behind and moving. He checked his mirrors, nothing but darkness. The red lights didn't cast shadows, didn't bounce off his fenders. Just floated. Steady as moonlight, the same exact distance behind him, no matter how fast or slow he went. He tried to shake it off. Maybe it was some kid in a hotbed. Maybe a hallucination from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But when he pulled over on a gravel shoulder and stepped out to take a piss, he heard it. Not an engine. Not tires. Breathing. Low, wet, rattling. Like lungs full of river water. He turned fast. No one there. The road stretched empty in both directions. Not a car, not a coyote, not a whisper of wind, but the red lights had moved. Closer now. Not in the rear view anymore. Right beside his truck. He climbed back into the cab and locked the door. Like that would help. He turned the key, and the engine coughed once, twice, then roared to life. He jammed the stick into gear and peeled rubber so hard the reefer rocked behind him like a ship in a storm. The lights kept pace. He radioed again, voice tight with panic. This is Unit 302, heading west on 66 near Cadillac Ranch. Possible vehicle. Pursuit. Not normal. Repeat, not normal. Only static answered. But deep inside that hiss, he thought he heard a voice. You passed them. We don't forget. He didn't know what that meant. Not then. But Route 66 remembers things. It remembers the kids who vanished hitchhiking. The women left behind at truck stops. The broken souls who pulled over to cry and never got back in. The car. It remembers the lost. The forgotten. The punished. Jacob had once hit a man outside Shamrock. A hitcher, drunk maybe. It was 2003. He'd been drinking himself. Said the guy ran into the road out of nowhere, like a shadow peeled off the Pialzivov. Night. He never stopped. Kept driving until Oklahoma. The blood on his fender washed off in the rain. The guilt DIDN single quotes T. Now, 20 years later, the road had remembered. The lights grew brighter. No heat, no source, just that red glow seeping into the cab, painting everything the color of a dying flare. He couldn't see what they were coming from, but they weren't headlights. They were eyes. He drove 80 miles an hour, then 90. Every warning light on the dash lit up. His freight rocked. His teeth rattled. But those things stayed with him silent, relentless, patient. At one point, the lights passed him. They floated past, side by side with his window. And that's when he saw them. Not people. Not exactly. Figures frozen behind the glass of something. Not built on earth. Pale faces, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide and red as if the light had bled into them. One of them had no face at all, just a blank canvas of skin. Another one looked just like the man Jacob had hit all those years ago. But the last one? The last face was his. Staring at him. Smiling. He screamed and veered hard to the left. The reefer jackknifed. Tires blew. The truck rolled. Metal screamed. When he came to, daylight was breaking. He was upside down in the cab, bruised and bloodied but alive. A farmer found him, called an ambulance. He told the cops he swerved to avoid a deer. No one questioned it. They never found the trailer, just skid marks that ended in nothing, and a wide burn on the highway that glowed faintly under UV light, like something too hot for rubber or fire had scorched it. Jacob doesn't drive anymore. He lives in a camper behind a gas station in Tucumcari. Drinks too much, talks too little. But some nights, when the wind shifts and the radio picks up ghost stations, you can hear him whispering into the static, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to leave him there. I thought he was already gone." And if you ever find yourself on Route 66 near Amarillo, especially near Vega after midnight, stay in your lane, drive straight, and pray they don't pass you. Beaumont had changed since the mill closed in '89. The jobs dried up first, then the buses stopped running. By the early 2000s, folks said the city had a soft rot to it. It was in the boarded windows, the buckled sidewalks, the layers of graffiti. Scrub it off only to reappear the next morning like scabs on the same wound. But the marsh never changed. It stretched out just east of the city, low and weedy and always wet no matter the season. The kind of place that sucked in your boots and left behind a stink you couldn't scrub off. People avoided it not because of snakes or sinkholes, but because of the stories. Not the kind passed around campfires either. These were told in whispers by bartenders at last call or by aging school janitors who drank too early in the day. Stories about children in the reeds, about voices on the wind, about laughter when there should be none. There hadn't been a school within 10 miles of the marsh in 50 years. West Pine Elementary had burned down in the spring of 1974 and no one rebuilt. The blaze started in the teacher's lounge, but spread so fast it took out the entire west wing before the fire trucks even arrived. By the time the smoke cleared, the only things left standing were a few twisted swings and the charred bell tower. The tragedy wasn't the fire, though it was the 11 kids who had gone missing in the weeks before. 11 students, aged 6 to 10, vanished one by one. No forced entries, no ransom notes. Just gone. They were last seen on school grounds. Last heard laughing. That same kind of laughing people swore you could hear in the marsh when the fog rolled in. Marcus Dane had been too young to remember the fire, but not the fear. His older brother Caleb had been one of the 11, vanished in broad daylight on the playground. 1 minute playing tag, the next nothing but his untied shoe left behind in the grass. Marcus was only 4 then, but he remembered the scream his mother let out when the police knocked on their door. That scream echoed in his head every time he passed the marsh. He left Beaumont at 18, stayed gone for over 3 decades. Became a history teacher in Austin, got married, divorced, retired early. But something about Beaumont pulled him back like a splinter under the skin. When his mother passed and left him the family house, he came home, cleaned it up, trimmed the yard, walked the streets that had grown quieter than he remembered, and the marsh was still there. damp and waiting. He heard them on his fourth night back. It started with humming soft, off-key, a tune just familiar enough to make your stomach twist. Then came the giggles, high-pitched, childlike, not playful. There was something strained in the sound, like a laugh caught in the throat of someone who didn't understand why they were laughing in the first place. He stood at the kitchen window, frozen, staring into the black line of reeds at the edge of the property. The sound was close. Too close. He told himself it was wind and frogs, nothing more. But that same night, his front porch light turned on, by itself 3 times. And in the morning, he found small, wet footprints on the welcome mat, barefoot, no bigger than a child's dot by the end of the week. He was sleeping with the bedroom door locked and a knife on the nightstand. Marcus tried telling people. The waitress at Benny's Diner, the guy who delivered propane, even old Miss Carlyle, who used to be the town librarian and still handed out stories like they were overdue books. Every one of them gave him the same look, pity laced with fear. Not one of them said it out loud, but they all knew. They remembered. And none of them wanted to go near it again, but Marcus couldn't let it go. Not after what he saw. It was just before dawn. A thick fog hung over the marsh, heavy as wet wool. He'd woken from a nightmare, his brother calling for him, voice muffled and far away. Marcus stepped outside, barefoot on the cold wood of the porch, and saw something moving in the reeds. It wasn't big. A small shape, maybe 4 feet tall. Walking slowly, it paused, tilted its head toward him. And then he saw it. The pale face, the hollow eyes, and the thing in its hand, a soggy, dirt-covered unchbox. He whispered one word, Caleb. The thing turned and disappeared into the mist. Marcus followed. The marsh was colder than it should have been. He sank to his ankles in black water, thorns. Catching at his jeans, the humming grew louder. He passed a tire swing, half submerged in mud. A rusted bicycle leaning against a cypress tree. A teacher's desk with claw marks gouged into the wood. The farther he went, the stranger the things became, fragments of classrooms buried in swamp muck. Chalkboards with writing still faintly visible. A child's backpack dangling from a branch like a corpse from a noose. He found the clearing near. Dawn. It shouldn't have been there. A dry patch in the middle of the marsh, ringed by cattails. In the center, the skeleton of a schoolyard. Monkey bars, teeter-totters, a merry-go-round rusted to hell. And children, at least a dozen of them, some sitting, some standing, all turned away from him, facing the play equipment. Their clothes didn't match. Some wore denim overalls from the 70s, others bright t-shirts stained with something dark and crusted. But all of them were wet, dripping as if they'd been pulled from the bottom of the swamp. Marcus stepped into the clearing. The air was thick and wrong. The children turned. Their faces were smooth and featureless at first, like wax masks in the heat, but as he looked, they changed, shifted, grew eyes, noses, mouths, and one by one, he saw them clearly. His brother, the girl with pigtails from the missing posters, the boy who used to ride the bus, with him. Each one of them staring, silent. And then they began to hum. Marcus screamed. He turned to run, but the reeds had moved, closed in, trapped him. The air thickened. His skin froze. And the last thing he heard before everything went black was the shrill ring of a school bell. They found his body a week later, or what was left of it, kneeling at the edge of the marsh, eyes wide open, lips blue, fingers clutched around an old, cracked unchbox. Inside it, a single photo, 11 children, 1 teacher, and Marcus, all standing in front of West Pine Elementary, smiling. There hadn't been a school nearby for 50 years, but every now and then, just after sundown, the reeds sway when there's no wind. And if you listen closely, You'll hear them, laughing, humming, calling your name. The door had no hinges, no handle, no frame. Just a flat, matte black rectangle embedded into the weather-beaten brick behind the old Teatro de Esperanza. And if you didn't know better, you might mistake it for a shadow, the kind cast by a forgotten billboard or an old rusted-out fire escape. But the door was neither shadow nor trick of light. It had substance, weight, and it breathed. Rosa Lujan had lived in McAllen. Her entire life, 68 years of sunburned summers, hurricane seasons, and chain-link fences that buzzed like angry hornets when you got too close. She remembered the Teatro when it was alive. Back then, it had been the beating heart of the barrio. Families lined up for Sunday matinees, lovers snuck kisses in the red velvet balcony, and old Senora Carlotta played the organ during silent horror films. That scared the good Lord back into you, but that was decades ago. The theater had gone dark in 1963 after the mysterious fire that everyone said started in the projection booth but never spread. Just one chair had burned, one reel of film, one technician. No one really understood how it happened or why they never rebuilt. Still, the building remained. A husk, vines climbing over its flaking stucco, windows gaping like broken teeth. And behind it, a narrow alley choked with trash and windblown newspapers. That's where the door was now. Rosa swore. It hadn't been there a year ago, or even 6 months. It showed up the same week young Angel Martinez disappeared. Angel had always been a good boy. Rosa remembered him from catechism, quiet, polite, not the type to run off or cause trouble. But something changed that spring. He stopped showing up at school. Neighbors saw him wandering the streets after midnight, barefoot and muttering. One woman claimed he tried to sell her a birdcage filled with black feathers and ash. Then he was gone. The cops found his bicycle leaned neatly against the back of the theater. His phone was there too, playing a recording on loop. The audio was warped, a voice speaking in Spanish except the words were backward, distorted like someone had recorded it underwater. No fingerprints, no leads. Just the door. After Angel, others vanished too. A homeless woman named Lydia who used to sleep behind the Dollar General, a retired librarian who collected broken clocks, a pair of twin girls whose parents thought they were playing hide-and-seek too long. Each time, someone spotted the door open, but no one ever saw it open. That was the thing. You turned your back for a second, just long enough to light a cigarette or sneeze, and when you turned around, the door was open. Not ajar, not swinging, just open, and it was black inside. Not dark, not UNLIT.black. The kind of black that swallowed you. That made your skin crawl. That whispered your name in voices that weren't your own. Rosa tried to forget. She really did. But the dream started next. Every night at 3:07 a.m., she woke to the same sound. 3 knocks. Always from the back of the house. Always from the same rhythm. Knock, 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 pause. Knock dash, knock dash, knock. She tried boarding up the windows, sprinkling holy water. She even left a rosary in the microwave because her priest said evil traveled through signals now. Nothing worked. Then one night, Rosa heard her brother, Raul, had drowned when they were kids. Fell into a storm drain during a flash flood in '78. She still remembered the swollen water pulling him under, the way his eyes looked surprised even when the current took him. But here he was, decades later, whispering to her through the walls. Only, it wasn't his voice anymore. It was her voice saying his words. Abrenos, Rosita. Open the door. We're so close now. She went to the theater the next morning. Not because she wanted to, because she had to. That was how the door worked. It called to you, pulled at some invisible thread deep in your chest. You couldn't resist it for long. Not if it wanted you. The alley smelled like sulfur and roses. The air was too still. Too quiet. Even the flies seemed to avoid it. The door stood there, smooth and cold, with a symbol etched above it, an old Nahua glyph Rosa didn't recognize but felt in her bones. Something ancient, something buried before memory. She brought a tape recorder, a notebook. Her grandmother's cross. She knocked, once, twice, 3 times. The door opened. She recorded what she saw, what she heard. But the audio, when her niece played it back later, made no sense. It was Rosa's voice, yes, but backwards, garbled. At times screaming, at times weeping. And once it laughed. Long, slow, like something wearing Rosa's voice was laughing. Her body was never found, but her tape recorder turned up in someone's mailbox, 6 streets away. No fingerprints, no postage, just the smell of scorched sage and something rotten beneath it. And the door? Still there. Sometimes it's gone for weeks. Then one morning it's back again, darker than before, the edges sharp, the alley colder. Teenagers post videos on TikTok claiming they touched it and had nightmares for days. One girl says her reflection smiled at her 5 seconds too late. The city won't talk about it, won't tear down the theater. They say it's a landmark, a piece of history. But the locals know better. No one touches the black door. Not anymore. They cross the street, mutter a prayer, and listen carefully. Because if you ever hear someone call your name in reverse, don't answer. Don't turn around. Don't open the door. There were always homes that seemed too good to be true. Jody knew that. She wasn't naive. She'd flipped a few old places back in Austin plaster over termite holes, fresh paint on mildew, turn a dump into a dream and sell it before anyone had time to notice the creaking pipes or the way the light never quite touched the back hallway. It was a hustle, but it paid the bills and kept her one step ahead of the burnout she felt nipping at her heels. Tyler, Texas, was supposed to be her pause, her rest stop. The house on Willow Bend was big, too big for one woman, but the listing caught her eye. 3-bedroom Victorian. Original floors. Needs love. $45,000. It had sat vacant for over a decade, the listing agent said, but the bones were good. The neighbors were quiet. No disclosures other than the usual. Old wiring, old roof, old ghosts. Jody laughed at that last part, just a realtor's joke. She signed the papers in March and moved in with a few boxes, a toolbox and her Bluetooth speaker. But the house had its own music. It started the first night. She was stripping wallpaper in the hallway when she heard it, faint like something underwater. A woman's voice singing in a warbling alto through what sounded like vinyl static. Jody paused, looked at her phone. Nothing playing. The speaker was off. She walked toward the sound, slow and cautious, wondering if it was coming from outside. It WASN single quotes T. The music came from the walls. More precisely, from a spot above the living room fireplace, a solid section of wall with no outlet, no fixture. Just old, off-white plaster with a tiny spider crack running down its face. She pressed her ear to it. The static got louder. Then came the melody. I Walked the Line by Johnny Cash. She stepped back. Weird, she whispered. She looked around, half expecting someone to jump out and yell gotcha. But she was alone. The music faded away within a minute, and Jody told herself it was probably a neighbor's radio bleeding through. Old houses had thin walls. She let it go. But it happened again the next night. Different song. Heartbreak Hotel, same grainy tone. Same eerie distance, like it was playing from another world. By the end of the week, She had a list written in a notebook she normally reserved for measurements and paint samples. Night 1. Johnny Cash, I Walk the Line, 1956. Night 2. Elvis Presley, Heartbreak Hotel, 1956. Night 3. Frankie Lemon, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, 1956. Night 4. The Platters, My Prayer, 1956. She didn't make the connection until Night 5. When she Googled famous people who died in 1956, turns out there'd been a bus crash 12 high schoolers killed coming back from a state choir competition in Tyler. The accident had happened 3 miles from her new house. She found a black and white yearbook photo in a news archive. One of the girls in the front row looked an awful lot like the singer she'd heard on Night 3. It chilled her. But it didn't scare her. Not yet. She rationalized. Maybe the house had an old wiring system connected to a buried antenna. Maybe a neighbor was relaying vintage broadcasts through some ham radio contraption. She was a woman of logic, tools, sandpaper, contracts. Ghosts were for TV. Then came Night 9. She was brushing her teeth, trying not to stare at the ancient mirror that seemed permanently fogged in the corners when the sound started again, louder than ever before. Not from the fireplace this time, from the bathroom vent. It played Bittersweet Symphony. The Verve, 1997. Jody dropped her toothbrush. That was the song. The one playing in the car the night her brother died. He'd borrowed her CD. She never told anyone what song had been on. Not the cops, not their parents. No one. She sat down on the floor, back to the sink, listening with her mouth half open. Tears started falling without her even realizing it. The house knew. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she traced every room in the house with a notebook and a sound meter app, recording the location of each time the music started. The results were erratic. No speaker could be found. No Bluetooth device. No source. Just songs. Always different. Always from a past year. Always connected to someone's death. The night it played her attempted suicide song, Midnight City, 2011. She panicked. She hadn't told a soul about that either. Not even in therapy. She took a hammer to the wall above the fireplace. Beneath the plaster, there weren't bricks. There weren't wires. There was a cavity hollow with layers of old fabric, pages from a hymn book, and behind all that a radio, an antique GE model from the 1940s. Its cord was severed. It shouldn't have worked. But when she touched it, it turned on, dials spinning on their own. Then the walls around her began to hum. Not in music, but in heartbeat. Thump thump. Thump dash thump. The radio wasn't the source. It was the organ. The house had a heart. And it was beating. The next morning she packed her car and drove to Dallas, booked a hotel, and called her real estate agent to start the process of selling. But the music followed. The hotel room clock radio, despite being unplugged, turned on at 3:14 a.m. Exit music for a film, Radiohead. 1997, a song about running away from doom and losing. She drove back to the house the next day, determined to rip out every wall if she had to. When she stepped through the front door, the air changed. It felt humid, like breath. A final track played. Not from the wall. Not from any radio. From inside her head. It was a song she didn't recognize. She Googled it. Nothing. No lyrics match. No artist. No title. It was a song from next year. 2026. She understood then. The house didn't just remember the dead. It predicted the soon dash to dash die. Now she can't listen to music. Not in her car. Not in the store. Not on the street. Because every time she hears a song, any song, she hears a low static behind it. Waiting. One day soon, the house will play her song in full. And on that day, she knows, she'd die in perfect rhythm. It's funny how loneliness creeps in at 70 miles an hour. Not fast, not sudden. Just steady and silent, like the way oil seeps through gravel. That's the kind of quiet Pete Blacktop Halvorsen had grown used to. 30 years behind. The wheel of an 18-wheeler stretching across the backbone of America from the Florida swamps to the snowy ridges of Oregon. And no place made him feel smaller than that long stretch near Odessa, Texas. There's a point on I-20, just west of the city, where the road seems to disappear into black sand and empty wind. No cell signal, no lights. Just you, your rig, and the desert night. Pete never liked that stretch. Not because he believed in ghost stories, he didn't. He was too old, too tired, too experienced for that sort of thing. But he respected the silence. And silence, it seemed, had finally started speaking back. It started at 2:37 a.m. He remembered the time because his dashboard clock froze. Not dimmed, froze. The second digits just stopped blinking. It was the only light in the cab. Besides the dull green glow of his CB radio, the static came next, like sand scraping over metal. Then a voice, low and familiar. "Breaker 19, you copy?" Pete blinked. The voice didn't belong to anyone he knew. It sounded distant, like it was broadcasting from deep inside a tunnel. He picked up the mic. "Copy, this is Blacktop. You out there in the wind, friend?" There was a pause. Then, "I'm out here, Pete." The way it said his name, it was all wrong. Like someone trying it out for the first time. He hesitated. "Who is this?" The voice chuckled. Low, gravelly. "You know me." A second later, Pete's truck lights flickered. Then the CB popped again. "I remember Kansas City. She had red hair. You didn't mean to hurt her. But you didn't stop. Did you?" Pete's fingers clenched around the mic. His first instinct was to toss it out the window, but his hand wouldn't let go. The grip of that plastic handle felt tight, almost fused to his palm. "Who the hell is this?" He growled. "She cried when you left. You heard her in the mirror, didn't you? Every time you shaved." Pete dropped the mic like it had burned him. The truck veered a little before he corrected, sweat pouring down his neck. That had been 15 years ago. 15 quiet years. He'd buried that night with concrete and silence. No one had followed. No one had asked. Until now, the CB crackled again, and Pete could swear it didn't even need the mic anymore. "I know your wife's voice too. The way she begs you not to go every time you get behind the wheel. She knows, doesn't she? Not everything, but enough." "No," Pete whispered. Outside, the desert stretched out wide and breathless. A coyote howled somewhere far to the south. The air in the cab turned thick, humid. The kind of heat that sticks to your ribs. The voice came again, clearer. This time, "You remember Flagstaff, room 12. She was young. Real young. You took the key, you paid in cash. You told yourself it was her idea, but you stayed. You always stayed too long, didn't you?" Pete punched the dashboard, but the radio kept going. Static, then speech. Static, then a name. Then another name. Then details he hadn't spoken out loud in decades. It wasn't just memories. It was confessions. The worst ones. The kind you only tell yourself in a dream or a nightmare. The kind you think are buried. And each time the voice spoke, it sounded more like him. Not like him, exactly him. Like a perfect recording of his own voice. If it had been recorded underwater or under something else. He turned off the CB, unplugged the unit. Didn't matter. The voice kept going. "I want to hear about Amarillo, about the garage, about your brother." Pete's vision blurred. His knuckles went white on the wheel. That accident had been declared clean. His brother drunk. A simple crash. No one had looked twice at the brake lines. No one but Pete. I didn't mean to kill him, Pete whispered to no one. But you did. The voice was inside the truck now. No radio. No speaker. Just there. The GPS blinked to life on its own. Destination: Odessa refinery. Distance: 666 miles. He never typed that in, and when he tried to pull over, the wheel locked. The engine revved. He was no longer in control. The rig roared down the blacktop, as if possessed, hauling him deeper into the night. Signs blurred past. The number 666 kept flashing on road markers, even when they shouldn't be there. At one point he swore he saw a girl walking along the median. Red hair, torn denim jacket. Thumb out. He didn't stop, but she followed him anyway. He saw her in every reflective surface. Rear view. Side mirror. Even in the glossy black of the speedometer, she smiled. But her eyes were hollow. The voice kept going, never stopping, never pausing. It told him about the boy in Shreveport, the waitress in Lubbock, the whispers and rest stops that only he could hear. It listed names, locations, nights. It filled in details he'd forgotten, or tried to dot at exactly 30:33 a.m. The rig finally stopped. He was at a truck stop that didn't appear on any map. The neon sign buzzed. The pumps looked ancient, rusted. Over. A black crow sat on the roof, unmoving. The CB sputtered one last time. "I'm here, Pete. You ready to trade places?" He didn't answer. The door swung open on its own. Some say they found the rig 3 days later, engine off, keys missing, but headlights still glowing faintly. No one ever found Pete. But sometimes, when the night's long and the roads are empty, truckers say they hear a familiar voice on Channel 19. "Breaker 19, you out there? This is Pete. I'm trying to get home." And if you answer him, he'll ask your name, and if you give it, he'll start listing your secrets next. There's a hill on the southern edge of Abilene that doesn't show up on any tourist maps. Not that many people come looking for sightseeing in Abilene anyway. It's nothing much to look at. Just a long slope of hard-baked Texas dirt, studded with some stubborn mesquite and the brittle bones of old fence posts that no longer hold anything in. At the top, tucked behind a line of gnarled pecan trees, sits Elm Ridge Cemetery. Old as sin and quiet as a forgotten prayer. It doesn't look like much. Half the stones lean like drunkards in the summer sun, some names long worn away by time and wind. If you go up there, if you stand still enough, you can hear the power lines buzz like lazy wasps overhead, and every once in a while a mockingbird will shriek like it just saw something that made it want to fly into the sun. Most of the locals don't talk about Elm Ridge anymore. Not since the grave started growing. It began the way these things often do, quietly, almost respectfully. The grass was the first thing people noticed, thick and green and strange, like it had been transplanted from someplace wetter and kinder. At first it was just a small patch, maybe 2 feet across, nestled between the weather-stained markers of Clara Ray Sanderson and Jeremiah M. Croft. Both had died in the early 50s. No kin left in Abilene. No flowers. No visitors. No reason for anyone to notice until old Tom Granby took his mud daisy up for their usual walk and saw something odd. The grass was wrong. Too green. Too soft. Too perfect. He reached down, gave it a touch, and swore he felt it sigh. Not shift, not subtle sigh. Like something underneath had been holding its breath. The next morning, the patch was bigger. Granby told the cemetery caretaker, Vince Latimer, but Vince was too busy drinking off the last bit of last night's whiskey to pay attention. "Grass grows," he muttered. "That's what it does. Except it doesn't not like that. Not in West Texas dirt, where rain was a goddamn rumor for most of the year. Not in the dead of summer. Not without water, or fertilizer or care. But grow it did, every night, just a little more. 5 inches one week, a foot the next. By fall, it had swallowed 3 more headstones. Granby kept coming back. Every day. Watched it. Measured it. Talked to it. Neighbors thought he was slipping. Hell, maybe he was. But he said the grass was singing. Low and soft like a lullaby hummed through a mouth full of dirt. And then one morning, Granby didn't come home. Daisy came back, dragging her leash, howling like a banshee and covered in mud. Search teams found Granby's shoes by the edge of the grass. That's all. Not a drop of blood. Not a torn shirt. Just his goddamn shoes, sitting neat and empty like someone had just stepped out of them and vanished into the warm green carpet. After that, the city put up signs. Keep OUT on safe ground. But signs don't stop ghosts. Or teenagers. With nothing better to do, the grave became a dare. A proving ground. Lie in the grass for 10 minutes. Get your name in a notebook full of dumb bravery. One of those kids, Tanner Bell, 15. Acne and attitude, spent 20 minutes in it. Swore he felt fingers combing through his hair. He puked all the way home and refused to speak for a week. His mother found him scribbling in his notebook. Over and over, the same word. Below. Pastor Jim Melrose tried to hold a prayer vigil by the site. Made it about 10 feet from the edge before dropping to his knees and screaming about a door opening under his feet. It's not a grave, he sobbed. It's a mouth. After that, the town stopped pretending. The cemetery closed. The city put up a real fence, locked the gate, let the mesquite grow wild. But the grave kept growing, quietly, patiently, like ivy on a house no one lives in anymore. By the summer of 2017, it had reached the far side of the cemetery. 20. Graves vanished under that thick, sweet-smelling grass. It didn't just cover the stones, it erased them, like they were never there. And that was when the dream started. People who lived nearby, those stubborn enough or poor enough to stay, started waking up with dirt under their fingernails. One woman claimed she found moss growing behind her teeth. A boy woke up screaming about a man made of roots whispering his name from under the floorboards. Others dreamed of voices calling from beneath the lawn. Soft, familiar, promising. Just lie down a while. Just rest. Just be still. And still, it grew. Then came Linda Cleaves, a junior reporter from the Abilene Gazette. She was young, cocky. Thought she'd make a name for herself writing ghost stories for the Halloween issue. She went in with a camera, a notepad, and a big dumb smile. She never came out. They found her gear at the edge of the grass. No sign of her. But the footage was intact. The final shot, grainy, handheld, shaky, showed Linda reaching down, brushing her fingers across the grass, laughing. Then she paused, tilted her head, as if she heard something. A voice. Her own name. She looked directly into the camera, eyes wide and glassy. "It's not dead," she whispered. "It never was." The video cut to static. They say the grass is over an acre wide now, though no one's gone close enough to measure. No animals go near it. Birds don't fly over it. GPS won't track within its borders. It's like the world has decided not to notice, but the wind still talks. Especially at night. And if you go out there, if you stand very, very still, you can see the indentations, shapes, like something has been lying there, waiting. The grass is warm, always warm, even in February. And sometimes, if the wind dies just right, you can hear the sound beneath it, chewing. Fry Street in Denton always had a strange pulse after dark, like the whole road was holding its breath. It was college town's strange, shore-scrap metal art installations on people's lawns, glow-in-the-dark flyers stapled to power poles, and guitar music leaking from old houses turned student rentals. But this was different. Not weird in the way college kids made things weird. It was the quiet, crawling kind of weird. The kind that sat with its back to you, humming something familiar, until you turned around and realized no one was there. Clay. Jensen walked Fry Street that night with a buzz in his head and something heavier in his gut. He had just bombed a midterm. His roommate had bailed on rent again, and his ex-girl now had blocked him on everything. He'd spent the last 3 hours drinking bourbon and bad beer with a couple guys he barely knew. It was after 1 a.m. when he stepped out into the night. The bar's music cut off like a dream when you open your eyes. The street outside was empty, windless, and unusually cold for October. He turned up his hoodie, shoved his hands in his pockets, and started walking. The taco joint a few blocks down stayed open late, and he figured he'd grab a greasy burrito and clear his head. She was standing under the dead streetlight outside the shuttered record shop, an old, crumbling red brick building with poster-covered windows and a door that hadn't opened in a decade. She looked like a painting someone forgot to finish. Maybe 17, maybe 20. Pale, dark hair combed too carefully, like a porcelain doll someone had tried to make human. Her blue dress shimmered slightly, the way fabric shouldn't under. A broken light, no purse, no bag, just her, alone. When she looked up at him, her eyes didn't sparkle. They just were like holes cut into porcelain. "Excuse me," she said, voice flat and even. "Can I borrow your phone?" Clay blinked. He stopped walking. His first instinct was no, but something about her tone short-circuited his thinking. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't scared. It was certain. As if she already knew he'd say yes. He handed her the phone. She didn't ask him to unlock it. She didn't fumble with the buttons. She just put it to her ear. And then, without touching anything, it rang loud, sharp, the sound of his custom. Ringtone, Ain't No Sunshine. Only one person had ever been assigned that tone, himself. He stared at the screen. There was no incoming number. No caller ID. Just a swirling black vortex spinning in the center of the display. A hole, endless. Digital but ancient. She didn't react. Just tilted her head slightly as the voice came through the speaker. "Don't hang up, Clay," his own voice said. He jerked back, legs stiff with a sudden electric cold. "What the hell?" The girl turned the phone so the speaker faced him. And then, calmly, like someone reciting lines they'd rehearsed for years, she whispered, "You left him there, bleeding, crying for his mom." Clay's vision blurred. He staggered back against the wall of the building, mouth dry. "Who?" "You remember the crossing in Crum," the voice said. His voice. "You were driving too fast. No headlights. No stop. You heard him hit the bumper. You looked back once. And then you kept going." Clay's heart jackhammered against his ribs. He hadn't told anyone. He couldn't. It was 2 years ago. A small dirt road near the edge of Crum, barely marked. A teenage bike rider. No helmet. No streetlights. He hadn't meant to hit him, but he panicked. The car was old, the insurance was expired, and he'd just gotten a job interview in Dallas. So he drove away, fast, sick, praying someone else would find the boy. No one ever did. The body wasn't discovered until a week later. A hiker found the skeletonized remains in the drainage ditch. The case stayed open, cold, until this moment. "You don't get to forget," the girl said. Her mouth hadn't moved. The words came through the phone, but her eyes locked onto his, like they were drilling through the layers of skin and memory and guilt. His knees buckled. He dropped to the sidewalk. The phone clattered beside him. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "You didn't stop." He looked up. The girl was gone. No footsteps, no movement, just the sound of his own breath rasping against the empty night. But the phone was still ringing. He reached for it, hands trembling. The voice on the other end changed. It wasn't his voice anymore. It was crying. Wet, broken sobs, like a child who'd been left in the cold too long. Then, very faintly, the sound of tires. Screeching. Impact. And silence. When he screamed, it wasn't human. It was the sound of everything held back finally escaping, like steam bursting from pipes that had cracked under the weight of years. He curled on the pavement, and the phone kept ringing, the screen flashing that same swirling black circle. Faster now. They found the phone the next morning. Screen shattered, the frame dented like it had been thrown from a rooftop. The case was smeared with blood, but not Clay's, not anyone's. The DNA didn't match anyone in the database. Clay never came home. His apartment door was locked from the inside. His toothbrush still damp. His laptop playing old jazz records on repeat. But he was gone. They say if you walk Fry Street alone after midnight, you might meet her, the girl in the blue dress, and if she asks to borrow your phone, you better keep walking. No matter how polite she sounds, no matter how still she stands, because if you hand it over, it will ring, and you'll hear the one thing that can't be unheard, your own voice, confessing sins you've never told a soul. The Midland County Courthouse squats like an old judge himself, robed in limestone and full of secrets. The building's bones are heavy with history, even though it's only been around since the 60s. 12 floors, they said, 11 above. Ground, 1 down. No more, no less. The elevator panel confirms it. 12 white buttons, worn smooth by decades of fingers. The last one just says, B1. Albert Raines was a man who respected numbers. Pipes had pressure ratings, boilers had. Gauges and stairwells had steps you could count usually. He had worked the courthouse maintenance since the Reagan administration, and if there was a leak, a draft, a short, or a strange smell, Albert knew about it before the judge's gavel hit the bench. So when Albert came up on a Wednesday afternoon, his face pale, lips cracked and moving like he'd seen something too big to name, people noticed. He didn't punch out, didn't make jokes with Curtis, the day janitor, didn't even grab his sandwich from the fridge, and he never skipped his sandwich. Just walked past the security desk and muttered something nobody understood. Later, the clerk swore he heard him say, "That door wasn't there yesterday." Albert wasn't at home that night. Or the next one. The sheriff's department filed it as a disappearance. One more old man, no next of kin, faded into West Texas heat like vapor off asphalt. That should have been the end. Until 2 weeks later, when a kid named Eli from the city's maintenance subcontractor went down to Basement 1 to replace a faulty breaker panel. Routine stuff: clip the wire, swap the fuse, log the repair. Only Eli didn't come back either. This time, they took it seriously. Cameras were checked. The elevator showed Eli going down at 6:43 p.m., toolbox in hand, hard hat on. But there was no footage of him ever returning. Here's where it gets strange. 2 janitors and a clerk all told the building manager the same thing. The elevator came back up a few minutes, later emptied, but the digital floor indicator flicked to a number that shouldn't exist, B13. It stayed there for 6 seconds. Then it blinked out. No one knew what to do with that. The elevator company blamed a faulty sensor. The county called in structural engineers. They brought blueprints, laser levels, and scanners. Every wall was measured. Every foundation beam mapped. And no, there was no sublevel beneath basement 1. But the whispers had started. Someone said they saw a door down there. Not a regular door, no knob, no hinges. Just a slit in the concrete, like someone sliced the wall open and then let time heal. It crooked. One of the younger deputies claimed he went looking for the fuse box and walked for 5 minutes through a hallway that didn't seem to end when he turned around. The courthouse wasn't behind him anymore. Just more hallway. He ran. Still doesn't talk about it. By August, 3 more workers had gone missing. No official statement connected them. Unrelated disappearances, the sheriff said on the news, rubbing sweat off his neck like it might help him forget. High-stress environment. People walk off, but people don't leave their shoes behind. And that's what they found outside the freight elevator. Eli's boots, side by side. Laces still tied. That's when the night guard, Henry Trujillo, started writing things down in a notebook. He worked the graveyard shift and said that some nights, after 3 a.m., the lights flickered in the security room. Only the camera feeds for basement 1 went dark. Then a humming sound started, soft at first, like electricity or distant bees. But it got louder until it was a buzz that filled your teeth. He said when it hit its peak, the air smelled like wet, dirt and old stone. One night, curiosity got the better of him. He went down the stairs instead of using the elevator, counted every step 62 to be one, but when he reached the landing, it wasn't concrete. It was tile, green, mismatched, cracked like an old-school hallway. He walked, heart thudding so hard he could barely breathe. The air was colder, not mechanical cold, underground cold. He could hear a radio playing somewhere ahead. Not clearly. Just snippets of something old and twangy, like Hank Williams' Underwater. Then he saw the wall. It looked wrong. Like it was made of the same material, but wasn't part of the original design. It curved inward with a slit straight down the middle. He swore it opened. He didn't see hands or hinges. Just the concrete, yawning, and something inside, waiting. Henry turned and ran so fast he tore a ligament. They found him on the first floor, crying like a child and clutching his flashlight like it was a rosary. He quit that night. Moved to El Paso. Won't answer questions, but the building remembers. That's the thing. You walk into the Midland County Courthouse and it feels off. Not haunted, exactly. Just aware. Like it's listening. The courthouse still functions. Trials happen. Judges preside. But more and more, staff find themselves catching glimpses of things that don't belong. A shape at the end of a hallway that disappears when approached. A door that was never there yesterday. Cold spots in the judge's chamber. The bailiffs. Dog refused to enter the service stairs. They sealed off the elevator to the basement last month. Said it was under renovation. And yet, every once in a while, someone new to the building says they took the elevator down and saw the button light. Up, B13. They say the doors open too slow. That the hallway outside hums. That the air smells like the ground in a fresh grave. They never go back. But the plaque near the elevator still reads the same. 12 floors, 1 basement. And each time someone vanishes, someone swears the lettering changes. Just a little dot by 1 dot until it doesn't lie anymore. The first thing you need to understand about Round Rock is that it's a place that pretends nothing is wrong, even when the ground shakes beneath your feet. It's got that slick, manicured suburbia glow-cul-de sac named after trees that never grew there, neighbors who mow their lawns at 7 a.m. on Saturdays, and a high school football team that's more religion than sport. The Raiders were gods on that field, kids playing for a shot at glory, or more commonly, a scholarship. That would punch their ticket out of town. But nothing earned more attention. Nothing shimmered brighter under those stadium lights than the cheerleaders. For years, it had been the same group of bubbly, overachieving girls with white bows and rehearsed pep. Until they came. It was The first home game of the season, late September. The air still hung thick with the last of the summer heat, and mosquitoes buzzed like tiny drunks under the lights. That night, 6 new girls walked onto the field in pristine red and black uniforms. No one had seen them try out. No one knew their names. But they moved with a kind of eerie precision synchronized to the breath. To the blink dot, they were perfect. Too perfect. Their smiles never faded. Not when the opposing team scored. Not when a player twisted his ankle right in front of them. They clapped and chanted with robotic joy, their eyes wide like they were looking through people instead of at them. At halftime, a couple of parents leaned against the fence and muttered about it. "Don't remember hiring new girls," someone said. "Weren't these the same ones here last week?" But no one followed up. That's the thing about Round Rock. You learn not to ask questions, especially the kind that make you feel cold. All over, Danny Laredo disappeared after that game. He was 17, handsome, smart enough to coast through school and charming enough to get away with it. He caught the winning pass that night 30 yards, ran it clean through, and the crowd screamed his name like a prayer. He was seen walking out of the locker room an hour later, humming something low and off-key. Not his usual song. Not anything anyone recognized. His cleats tapped across the parking lot pavement, and that was the last time anyone saw him. Found his truck behind the old Sonic 3 days later. Doors locked. Windshield wiped clean. Inside the cab sat his phone, still playing a voice memo on repeat. Static. Whispering. Something like chanting if you listened real close. No fingerprints. Not even his. His Raiders jersey was folded in the passenger seat like someone had done it with loving, inhuman care. People started talking then. Kids whispering in bathrooms, old-timers at the diner murmuring about things from back in the day. The cheerleaders, they said, weren't from here. They weren't new girls. They weren't girls at all. 3 weeks later, it was Lori Chun, sophomore, bright as a damn supernova, camera always slung around her neck. She stayed after the game to get action shots for the yearbook, wanted to be a photojournalist. Sighed. She had a weird feeling about the new cheerleaders. Told her best friend Megan she wanted to catch them in candid moments, prove they were faking it. Her camera was found under the bleachers the next morning, busted to hell like it had been stomped. The SD card was missing. The only thing left was the preview image on the tiny Screen 6 cheerleaders mid-jump, pom-poms frozen midder. Except their faces weren't right. Too symmetrical. Too hollow. Their eyes were black sockets, not makeup, not shadows. And their mouths were wide open, but they weren't smiling. Lori wasn't in school Monday. Or ever again. By then, parents were getting antsy. Some pulled their kids from the team. A few tried to transfer them to schools in Austin or Georgetown. But every time someone left, someone else filled the spot without interviews, without applications. Just appeared like a name on a class roster. And the cheerleaders? They never changed. Still 6, still identical. Still smiling like there. Mouths were nailed open from the inside. Miss Renner, the old cheer coach, came back from retirement and stormed the principal's office demanding answers. She claimed she never trained those girls, didn't know them, said their routines weren't the ones she wrote. She died in her sleep that same week. Coroner blamed it on a stroke, but her face, when they found her, was twisted into the same. Painted on smile the cheerleaders wore. The kids noticed first. They said the girls didn't blink, that their chants got louder the longer you listened, that if you looked at them too long, you forgot what quarter it was, what team you were rooting for, even your own damn name. One freshman ran screaming from the bleachers during a game against Cedar Ridge, clutching his ears and shrieking, "They're in my head, they're in my head." They institutionalized him. Nobody came to the final game of the season. The bleachers. Set half empty, the field lights flickering like they were trying to quit. The Raiders still played, but the cheerleaders were the real show. Their chants weren't chants anymore. They were incantations, verses in some dead language that vibrated in your teeth and made your nose bleed. The sky above the field turned, the color of old bruises, and the wind stank like sulfur and rotten flowers. People who stayed claimed the girls levitated, that they moved like they were pulled by wires, dancing above the field in impossible shapes, tracing patterns into the air like sigils. Coach Banner had a heart attack on the sidelines. He didn't die, but he couldn't speak afterward. Just stared at walls and drooled. That night, 6 new girls walked into the high school office, smiling that same dead smile. No one asked who. They were just ... accepted, added to the roll books, given lockers. The secretary didn't even remember doing a dot in the town's yearbook. The cheerleader section is strange. Their names are printed in faded ink. The photos are blurry, even though they were taken with a digital camera. One page has what looks like static burned into it, like a TV screen caught mid-signal. If you stare too long, you'll swear the girls are moving, chanting, watching you. Today, if you drive past the old stadium after dark, you'll see them. All 6, standing on the field under moonlight that doesn't fall anywhere else. They don't move, not unless you look away. Not unless you blink. And if you hear your name in their chant, run. Don't turn around. Don't answer. Just run. Because once they cheer for you, you're already gone. You just don't know it yet. They say it's the heat that makes people see strange things in South Texas. Heat bends the air, curls your vision, makes shadows out of nothing. But anyone who's lived long enough in Brownsville will tell you some things don't come from the heat. Some things are colder than hell. The yellow door first showed up in the spring of 1952. That's what the records say. But there are whispers, old wives' tales passed down like family curses, that it's been there far longer. They say even the Carrizo Kamacrudo tribe spoke of a sun door that opened to the land of hollow echoes. No one believed it, of course. Folk tales, myths, just stories to scare kids away from wandering too far. But the door is real. It sits alone in a cotton field 10 miles west of town, off a dirt road nobody's paved, on land nobody wants. Just a single yellow-painted wooden door standing upright, jammed into a concrete slab as if God himself sunk it there. No hinges, no latch, no house, no structure. Just the door, tall and narrow, the kind you might have seen in an old farmhouse. Every Sunday evening, without fail, it's freshly painted. Glossy yellow, so bright it hurts your eyes under the moonlight. But no one sees who paints it. No truck pulls up. No paint can get left behind. It's just yellow again. Like time resets. It ... and then once a month on the night of the full moon, it screams. Not a howl. Not a cry. It starts low, like a woman whimpering behind thick walls. Then it grows into a wail so sharp it'll bleed your ears if you're within a mile. Some people hear children begging. Others hear words in languages they don't speak. But everyone agrees on one thing. Whatever screams from behind that door is not human. Back in '59, a group of high school boys, dumb and drunk, dared each other to open it. 5 of them went out there with a crowbar and a 6-pack. Only 2 came back. One stopped talking entirely. The other couldn't stop screaming long enough to explain what happened. They found the rest a week later in the brush, half buried. Their hands were missing and their mouths were full of dirt. Sheriff Palmer sealed off the area with barbed wire and posted signs. Private property. Do not trespass. That didn't stop the curious. It never does. There was a preacher in 74, Reverend Allen. He said the door was a test from God, that it separated the righteous from the wicked. He stood beside it all night with a Bible and a jug of holy water. The next morning they found the jug shattered, the Bible burned to ash, and Alan blind, mumbling, staring at nothing. He spent the last 20 years of his life in the state hospital outside San Antonio, drawing yellow doors with crayon on the walls of his padded room. The nurses said he screamed every full moon. Said he swore there were faces behind the door, faces with no eyes and mouths that smiled too wide. The strangest part? The ground around the door never grows. No grass, no weeds, no animals. Just dry, cracked dirt like the earth is holding its breath. In recent years, folks have tried to debunk it. Paranormal YouTubers, TikTok ghost hunters, that kind of crowd. Most leave disappointed if they even make it there. GPS doesn't work. Near the field, phones die, batteries drain. The land itself seems to fight back. One group, 3 college kids from San Marcos, live streamed their trip. They made it to the door, even knocked on it, joking like it was all a game. The feed went static right after one of them said, "Let's open it." The only footage left shows a split-second glimpse of the door swinging inward, revealing something that looked like a hallway but made of bone. It was narrow, wet, and breathing. Only one girl made it back, Clara. She ran barefoot for 6 miles to a gas station, covered in yellow handprints. Her eyes were gone, just sockets full of dried paint. She kept saying, "Don't knock. Don't knock. It's listening now." She didn't survive the night. And then there's the dreams. That's the worst part. People in Brownsville who live within 10 miles of the field, they dream of the door. Always yellow, always closed. And in the dream, they're standing in front of it, holding the key. No one knows what happens if you open it in a dream. No one wants to. They say if you get paint on your doorknob, just a smear of yellow, you have 3 nights to move. Pack your things, leave. Doesn't matter where you go. Just don't stay. Because on the 3rd night, you'll hear it. A knock at your door. Once, then silence. If you answer, they find your body days later slumped in your chair, mouth filled with sawdust, and a doorframe in your living room where no door ever existed before. The town council doesn't talk about it. The police refuse to file reports. Brownsville has learned to forget, to look away, to paint over the fear with church signs and parades and barbecue, festivals. But the door is still there. It waits. And if you're driving through one night, out on FM 2220, and you see a flash of yellow in the field, don't stop. Don't slow down. Don't look back, because it only takes one person to open it. And it's been waiting a long, long time.